So a couple of months ago, I shared a series of videos of the top 10 cards due for their own decks for various characters in the original Yu-Gi-Oh series, with the first of those being for the lead character Yugi. And in that list, I mentioned some cards little Yugi uses in his duels against Bakura and the Pharaoh. Namely, there was Marshmallow, Gandora, and the Silent series, Silent Magician and Silent Swordsman. Now, clearly, I underestimated my level of influence because in just 2 months, Konami put together an entire Little Yugi archetype. So, this new support combines those few cards I mentioned, as well as the gadgets, into one cohesive archetype, and this is great for two reasons. First, Yugi has too many notable cards. If you go down this list, there are, of course, some of the ones he uses throughout the series, like Slifer, Karibo, and so on. And then there were some that had to be relegated to honorable mention status, like Buster Blader, and Blackluster Soldier, and then some cards that didn't even make the list, such as the Fierce Knight, Beaver Warrior, Curse of Dragon, cards like those. So a lot of notable cards, and making a distinct archetype for each one just isn't feasible. And two, and more importantly, by combining them under one umbrella, you can actually use all of these notable cards in one cohesive deck, which honestly is more fun that way. It's similar to how Konami is slowly making Red Eyes versions out of every notable Joey card, which I predict is how they'll approach the new Flame Swordsman support. Now, personally, I think some cards like Flame Swordsman are worthy of their own deck, but this series of little Yugi cards is not one of those. I'm fully on board with Konami taking this approach, so let's check out this new support due to drop in the OCG in January 2024. Shout out to Master Duel Meta for compiling this list. It will come down to the centerpiece of the deck, which is the spell Gold Sarcophagus of Light. Now, this is a continuous spell that cannot be destroyed by monster effects, so that's good. It has some built-in protection. And you can only use each of the following effects of this card once per turn. A, during the main phase, you can add one card from your deck to your hand that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light. Eventually, I'm going to slip up saying that. Try saying it 3 times fast. So this effect is kind of playing on the original Gold Sarcophagus that lets you add any card from your deck to your hand. And then the second effect is that if your opponent special summons a monster from the graveyard, you can discard one spell, then target one of those monsters and send it to the graveyard. So this is obviously a reference to how little Yugi uses Gold Sarcophagus to deny Atem's ability to Monster Reborn at the final duel that they have against each other. So overall, a pretty solid centerpiece. It has, again, that built-in protection. It can search out cards from the rest of the archetype. I believe all of the other cards do mention Gold Sarcophagus of Light. And then finally, denying your opponent's special summons from the graveyard, which obviously a lot of decks do these days. So this is a pretty powerful effect to have as well. Now let's come back up and go down the list from the monsters, starting with Gaius, Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction. However you say that. So Gandora obviously has a few different retrains. There's 3 different cards already, this being the 4th. And this one follows a similar effect that the other ones have, then of course being tied into the rest of the archetype with that Gold Sarcophagus of Light being mentioned in its text. So this effect gains 300 attack for each banished card. It starts off at 0 and 0. And then you can use each of the following effects once per turn. If you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light, you can special summon this card from your hand. And then you can pay half your life points, destroy as many other cards on the field as possible, and if you do, banish them. So a very powerful field wipe that not only gets rid of the cards, but banishes them. And then you can special summon one level 7 or lower monster from your deck that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light. So again, that'll probably all the rest of the monsters on this list. And if you do, increase its level by the number of cards destroyed by this effect. So this level manipulation, I kind of took a peek at some of the other cards already, but this level manipulation will come in handy as we'll see with some of the other cards. But overall, this is probably the boss monster of the deck. It can wipe the board at a moment's notice and leave you with a monster from your deck, which we'll see here. One of those could be Silent Swordsman 0. So this is another retrain of the Silent Swordsman series, which of course came out in the level forms at first, then was retrained to Silent Swordsman, and now we have Silent Swordsman 0. So once per turn during the standby phase, increase this card's level by 1. So here comes that level manipulation. And this card gains 500 attack equal to the difference between its current level and its original. So of course, if you bring it out with Gandora and increase its level by 3, then it'll come out at 2500. Now it has another effect when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets Gold Sarcophagus of Light and or a monster that mentions it. Obviously that includes itself. you can negate that activation. And if you do, increase this card's level by 1. So it has the ability 2 different ways to increase its own level. And this is another form of protection for not only your gold sarcophagus, but any of your cards that mention it, or I guess any of the monsters that mention it. Now moving down to the other Silent Retrain, Silent Magician 0. This card has the effect that when your opponent draws a card, it increases its own level by the number of cards drawn. And then while, again, its card's current level is higher than the original, it gains attack equal to the difference times 500. It has another effect when your opponent activates a spell card or effect while you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light. You can negate the activation, and if you do, increase its card's level by 1, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. So this card has the ability to negate spells, kind of like what the retrains of the Silent series have. So alongside your Silent Swordsman 0, you can negate cards or effects that target your Gold Sarcophagus and monsters that mention it, and you can also negate spells altogether. So pretty powerful 2 negations to help protect your Gold Sarcophagus as well as any of your monsters. Now moving on to the Gadget Retrain Tricolor Gadget. This is a card that is true to the original gadgets where when you summon it, you get a +1. In this case, you get to add 1 Gold Sarcophagus of Light or a spell or trap that mentions it from your deck to your hand. So this is pretty cool because it works in a loop. You can either start off with this, use this to fetch your Gold Sarcophagus of Light, or you can use Gold Sarcophagus of Light to add this card from your deck to your hand and then use it to add any one of the other spells from your deck to your hand that mentions the Gold Sarcophagus. This card has another effect where if it is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can set 1 stronghold, a hidden fortress directly from your deck, and you can only use each of these effects once per turn. Since this card mentions another card, I'm guessing it is on this list, and here it is. So let's just take a look real quick. Stronghold of Hidden Fortress is a continuous trap that special summons itself as an effect monster, a trap monster, and it has these effects. It gains 1,000 attack for each card you control that is Gold Sarcophagus of Light or a monster that mentions it, which I believe should include itself, so it'll at least come out at 1,000 attack. And then once per turn, when an opponent's monster declares an attack while you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light, you can destroy that monster. So some battle phase protection as well. All right, now coming back up to the next monster on the list, the final monster on the list is Mashi Marshmallow, the retrain of Marshmallow, where if you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light, this card cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, your opponent's monsters cannot target other monsters for attack. So it kind of combines Marshmallow's original ability as well as Marshmallow glasses, which explains why it has the glasses on here in the art. Konami really thought that one through. And then it has some other effects that you can only use once per turn during your opponent's turn. If you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light, you can special summon this from your hand. And then if this card is destroyed by a card effect, you can special summon one of your other Mashi Marshmallows that is banished or in your hand, deck, or graveyard. And if you do, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. So of course, this card can be destroyed by battle. And if your opponent destroys it by effect, it has the ability to loop with another copy of Mashi Marshmallow. So the intention here is to run at least 2. So that if you lose one, you can get the other one, whether it be banished from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Really, the only way to get rid of it is to get rid of it without having destroyed it. So banishing it, sending it to the graveyard, bouncing it, whatnot, or by banishing it face down. All right, so that does it for the monsters. Now we come to the spells. First, of course, was Gold Sarcophagus. This card, as we've seen up to this point, is the card that makes everything else go. It's kind of like the Toon world of the deck. Toons, of course, being a deck that relies on that spell to access its most powerful effects. Gold Sarcophagus of Light is similar. And as we'll see, the spells and traps also play off of it as well. So first up is Turn Silence. This is a quick play spell that targets one face-up monster you control and it increases its level by 3. So right then and there, you can give your silent cards a 1,500 attack boost. And if you activated this card in response to your opponent's monster effect activation, while you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light and a monster that mentions it, negate that opponent's effect. All right, so now we have the ability to negate spells, to negate monster effects, to negate effects that target your Gold Sarcophagus and monsters that mention it, and now we have the ability to negate monster effects. And it has another effect where during damage calculation, if your monster that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light battles, you can banish this card from your graveyard and end the battle phase. So if your opponent tries to get rid of one of your monsters that mentions the centerpiece, you can end the battle phase then and there. hence turn silence. Coming to Ties of Friendship, we have a normal spell where if you control Gold Sarcophagus of Light and a monster that mentions it, special summon up to 2 level 4 or lower monsters with different names from your hand and or deck that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn after this card resolves. So pretty good spam tool right here. I guess the main combo that I can think of is that when you use Gandora to blow up the field, Gandora being a monster, and since your Gold Sarcophagus of Light is immune to being destroyed by monster effects, your Gold Sarc will stay on board. You can use Gandora's ability to then bring out Tricolor Gadget, which can then search out this card, and then you can use this card to bring out 2 more cards, probably your silent cards, to be able to give you a spell negate and a effect negate that targets one of your Gold Sarc or monsters that mentions it. So again, a lot of cohesiveness and combo potential going on with this deck. But let's come to the next spell card, the final spell and the final card that we have, Silence Towards the Future, a quick play spell where you can add a monster from your deck to your hand that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light. Then, if you activated this card during the battle phase while you control the Gold Sarcophagus and a monster that mentions it, each player draws cards until they have 6 in hand. All right. So, a lot of stuff going on here. First, here is a third searcher. So we have Tricolor Gadget that can add one of your spells. We have Gold Sarcophagus that can add one of your monsters. And then we have a card here that can add a monster as well. Make sure I got that right. Off the top of my head, Gold Sarcophagus adds any card that mentions Gold Sarcophagus of Light. And the gadget can add, Gold Sarcophagus or any spell trap that mentions it. And then your Silence Toward the Future can add a monster. All right, so the other effect that this card has is a callback to the anime version of Card of Sanctity and or a support for Slifer, one or the other. But the fact that you can draw 6 cards is pretty nasty. It gives your opponent that as well. So this is, I wonder how this will end up. We'll see. Obviously, it's a way to boost your Silent Magician's attack, and if you happen to be running Slifer, it can boost its attack as well. But a callback to Card of Sanctity, so pretty cool right there. Obviously, the original print of Card of Sanctity wasn't very good at all, so it's pretty cool that they made a callback to it. All right, and we already discussed the trap. So overall, I think Konami has done a very good job with this. If we go down the list, or up the list, you have a board wipe, a targeting negate for your archetype cards, a spell negate, 3 searchers, battle protection, destruction, and battle phase termination, disrupting your opponent's graveyard summons, monster effects, negation, and special summon from your deck, and draw power. So this deck really does have a wide variety of effects that make it so it's not linear or autopilot. While that doesn't mean that there aren't go-to plays or obvious starters, each duel can look different from the last, and that makes the game more fun. And I'm glad they opted to exclude archetype-specific extra deck monsters because it really does honor the legacy nature of these cards, originally having been released in an era where the extra deck was a fusion deck. Hashtag Yugi, you boomer. On the downside, however, is that this isn't necessarily a critique of things, but just a weakness of the deck is that just about everything relies on this card right here, Gold Sarcophagus of Light. And there are some decks out there that do function at a high level despite having one card at the centerpiece. Think Dark Magician or Blue Eyes. But then there are some that end up suffering from that over-reliance on one card. Think Toon World. And since this is a spell with just built-in protection against monster effects, so it won't protect you against any spell trap removal, if your opponent can get it off the board, you lose access to your most powerful effects. Again, not a design flaw. It's good to give an archetype weaknesses, but just something to keep in mind if you want to play the deck. But I'm looking forward to giving this deck a spin when it's available on one of these online platforms, and we'll share some more thoughts at that time. Until then, let me know your thoughts. Does this deck have potential, or is it just a friendlies deck? What are some other in-archetype combos? Do you like it, dislike it? Should Konami have consulted me? I don't know, I kind of like it. Well done, Konami. Well done.